When I was 23, I learned about climate change after being told to represent lawyers supporting the fracking industry. Once I knew about the damage humans had caused the environment and my responsibility to play an active role in making better choices, I felt morally bound to quit my job. In doing so, I found a sustainability-focused PR firm to work for. After 3 years of absorbing every piece of science I could find on the problem and potential solutions, I felt quite hopeless. I knew I could do more, but I didn't know where to turn. I then learned about biomimicry, the concept of creating solutions to design problems inspired by nature's successful strategies, researched and developed over the past 3.85 billion years. Finally, I had hope with an actionable path forward that truly it made sense. I pursued my master's of science in the discipline and began to learn about the empathy we can have for all other species on this earth simply by becoming aware of their unique stories and roles in their ecosystems. And this helped me find a deep interconnectedness to others I hadn't yet experienced in our independence-focused, self-serving society. Somewhere along the way, I injured my back. I slipped my L5 vertebra over the sacrum below it. I ruptured a disc between the vertebrae and had another disc higher up bulge in the opposite direction. Needless to say, this was a pretty painful experience that completely debilitated me for several months. Nature was my safe place. I had a hope for the future. I was determined to get back to walking, having a social life, not being consumed with pain. And I did. I got to a place with much rehabilitation where I avoided the spinal fusion surgery and could manage the daily chronic pain. I successfully created a functional life despite living with that pain, fear, and extreme cautiousness. Now, fast forward 5 years, and I've said goodbye to my best friend, my dog Bear, ended a 4-year relationship that included a year of me being a full-time caregiver with my partner who was in a motorcycle accident, and then I just wiped out on my scooter. I was lucky it wasn't a collision, and rather I lost a battle to some gravel. But isolated in Hawaii by my own choice, I called my ex, who had since been very emotionally abusive from his own insecurity and pain. My new passion-filled job transformed into an inability to perform, made worse by myself, induced pressure and fear of not being or doing enough. I was lonely and my sanctuary was in nature, but I still felt stuck, limited to the confines of my home. But I learned about the birds here and their daily routines. I slowed down, I looked inward, I found so much positivity, but the pain continued to grow. I accepted that help from my ex despite his own mobility challenges and his determination to win me back. I kept my friends far for fear they would get sick of my chronic daily pain and lack of ability to walk beyond the front door. Fatigue and depression got harder every day, making it challenging to get out of bed. Multiple doctors assigned pills and skills to help me manage the pain. Dozens of tests were taken to rule out every inflammatory disease in the book, and surgery offered to fix the structural instability with a 50% chance of pain reduction. Not great odds. The pain continued to grow, and I reached a new level of exhaustion. Hope was long out of reach. My body, mind, and spirit were tired, but became one with nature in a different way. I found peace and a sense of accomplishment, but the pain was still so unbearable. I was ready to end this life if it meant freedom. I thought about how a decision of suicide would affect my family, my mom and my sister especially. Ultimately, my crippled misery feared becoming a burden to them, and I was ready to put myself first in this scenario to live freedom from pain. Then one afternoon, I gave cranial sacral therapy a shot, and it opened a line of communication with my body, and I realized how unsafe she felt with me, how I'd been driving her around like a car my whole life. I had been abusing her for so long. I didn't trust her. She didn't trust me. My therapist helped help me peer in deeper into the thoughts of these emotions. When was the last time we had felt safe? Being held in my grandmother's arms as an infant. I breathed into that space, allowed my emotions to surface, and in that moment, the sciatic pain down my right leg turned off. The left still remained and my back was still radiating pain, but for the first time in a long time, I had hope again. I realized then I may be able to actually eliminate this pain. Since my childhood, I had unconsciously sought to obtain the unmet needs for my caregivers, always attracting the same kind of people that were unable to give them to me. Later, I'd realized that these needs could only be found in myself. But at the time, I knew I had challenges with my father growing up, but I had no idea the depth of the emotional trauma experienced from those early years with my grandmother leaving, and from the loss of not having a father that protected me and supported me, and the loss of Bear, my little man. The pain from my sister's mental health challenges also added to this loss, and all of this grief had not been processed in a healthy way. And if you'd have told me 6 months ago that my acute injury would heal, but the pain wouldn't go away until I worked through the deeply embedded emotional trauma, I likely would have gotten incredibly defensive. The inward journey led me to the work of Doctors Howard Schubner, John Sarno, and countless other physicians and psychotherapists who introduced me to concepts of the mind-body connection and how on an MRI, emotional trauma triggers the same neurons in the brain as physical trauma. So while I did have a real structural problem and still do, I now understand that the acute pain should be able to heal with time and proper recovery. And I don't have to live in chronic pain the rest of my life. The anxiety and fear and anger accumulated over the past 31 years had been stored in my body, gaining pressure from all the daily activations of the triggers, waiting for the moment to finally shut down all functioning in an effort to distract from the original source. The trauma that my unconscious mind deemed too hard to process. I'm really glad I didn't take my life that day. I understand now that all pain is real. True healing occurs when the source of the pain is found, rather than covering up the symptoms. I truly feel none of this would have been possible without understanding the natural world and the empathy for all of life created here. It helped ground me and gave me that initial bridge to finding the connection into myself. So, to repeat, all pain is real, and all pain is created in the mind. Some pain can be signaled by the body's response to the environment, such as real dangers like heat on a stove or a fractured bone. But what I've learned very intimately is that that's not the only signal. The mind serves as a protector, an interpreter of your unique experience. We can think of the unconscious mind kind of like a child. It can be quite illogical and irrational. And sometimes, while it's trying to protect us out of fear, it can stimulate a response in the body to distract us from the repressed emotional pain. So ingenious is the mind that it can actually simulate symptoms that mimic previous injuries or create new manifestations with severity. The mind has decided the emotional trauma is too much to bear. So instead, it distracts the conscious mind to focus on a physical problem. Now, this is obviously not always the case. It's important to rule out acute structural problems and diseases and go through proper healing protocols. But if you've done that and you're like me, who has done all of the work and still lived with months and years of chronic pain, even after the acute injury has healed, you may begin to wonder why there would be pain. Yes, there is the potential for degeneration and arthritis, which I have much of. But within weeks of accepting the reality that my pain could be activated by suppressed emotions and taking steps to address them, my body felt 80% of its pain released. And today, I can honestly say that I am virtually pain-free. Through this journey, I've confronted my father and took back my power that I had given him, which also transferred to taking back my power from the emotionally abusive partner I had walked away from. I used my voice to create healthy boundaries, to replace the walls that I had put up that kept me from friends and family. I created a foundation for processing my emotions as they arise, and I let go of much of the control I had tried to place on the world around me, even controlling my own emotional response and experience. I realized I could only belong to myself. I could only create safety in myself. And then I decided I was going to be love, to radiate the energy that connects all life together, coming from the very real form of an imperfect human animal. I got a chance for another turn on life, and with this opportunity, in my very much recognized good fortune, privilege, and financial stability to go through this process and hopefully help pave the way for others, I established a commitment to compassion, continual education, making mistakes and learning from them, and above all, being authentic. This is a very personal testimony to the real epidemic of chronic pain and fatigue ruling our society today. In creating a foundation for processing my emotions, I am now able to live a balanced, imperfect human life. I recognize my own worthiness and strength, and I find safety in myself. And yes, the pain comes around, but because I'm now able to see and speak with my body and open dialogue to understand what's happening, I have a better path to figure out if it's time to go to the doctor or if it's time to go to the therapist. I also wholeheartedly recognize the ancestral trauma and real obstacles of today's unjust society toward Indigenous peoples and people of color. And I believe this path is not easy for anyone. And in fact, it's going to likely be much harder for many. I can only speak to my experience right now and recognize that ultimately this journey begins with each of us showing up for our own experience and our own perception of the world. and calling out the injustice seen in our own lives and against others. And the greatest tools that we have are to lean on each other and choose love and compassion for ourselves and all life around us. This is how we can heal ourselves and the planet. Your pain is real. We've masked the symptoms for so long. It's time to create a society that supports understanding the root cause, valuing mental health, and making affordable mind and body rehabilitation accessible. If you cannot afford a therapist, there are plenty of books and videos available to help you get started going inward. It's just important to start somewhere. It's a brave and worthwhile journey, and may very well be the biggest evolutionary opportunity of our time. Thank you for listening. Aloha.